Hello fellow wand lovers! We've got some new toys and buffs with the recent update on June 7th. I'll go over everything very quickly, in as much detail as I can, starting with technique buffs. Foy has seen a buff from 255 to 300 potency. That's about an 18% increase. At the same time, the potency allocation for the uncharged version was reduced from 75 to 66%. This raised the DPS of the charged version significantly while only slightly buffing the uncharged version, which was already decently strong. The big takeaway here is that using Foy for mobbing isn't weaker than Talus spread shot anymore. Big W for force. On Techter, I'd still suggest using Talus for mobbing. Giveaway potency was increased from 410 to 430, just under 5% increase. Nothing else was changed about it. It's stronger across the board and remains the best technique for us to use in order to swap our wand element. Previously, charged giveaway with Foy brand was interchangeable with Swift Smash in terms of DPS. With this buff, using giveaway after Fomelgen is now a slight DPS gain, at least on enemies weak to fire. Barta has seen an increase of 7% from 280 to 300 potency. There is not much to talk about this tech in a vacuum. What's interesting however is the buff to Jabarta. It was buffed by 24% from 250 to 310 potency. Meanwhile, the potency allocation for the uncharged version was reduced from 60 to 55%. What this means for force is that Barta is now the better technique to build the Barta Blot sigil, while Jabarta is now the better technique to pop it. For us Techters the same rule applies. Jabarta is now straight up better for element swaps and as a follow-up to Barancian. The only caveat is that Jabarta is fan-shaped, so you might need to use it at point-blank range in order to make sure you hit a weak point. In terms of accuracy and range, Barta is still better. This buff definitely added a lot of nuance to ice techniques that was previously missing. Zonda saw only a minor tweak. The Ricochet Lightning, caused by a Zonda-clad boosted Zonda, is now stronger. This was done in order to fix a design flaw with Zonda as a mobbing tool. Previously, the Ricochet on charged Zonda dealt the same damage as the uncharged Zonda. This meant that you were spending more time performing the same damage. Obviously that's a DPS loss. It was straight up better to not interact with the clad mechanic and just keep spamming uncharged Zonda. With this change to Ricochet damage, it is now better to use the charged version when Zonda clad is available. The Zonda was buffed across the board. The potency was increased by 3% from 320 to 330. Meanwhile, the potency allocation of the uncharged version has been increased from 6 to 6.3%. There is not much to talk about with this one, it simply got stronger. Zon was buffed by 11% from 260 to 290 potency. The main takeaway here is that using Zon over Talus spreadshot for mobbing is now better. I'd still recommend Techters sticking to Talus as charged Zon still moves at a snail's pace. Gizen was buffed by 8% from 250 to 270 potency. Previously, charged Gizen with Zon Gale was interchangeable with Swift Smash in terms of DPS. With this buff, using Gizen after Zandian is now a slight DPS gain, at least on enemies weak to wind. Grants was buffed by 7% from 290 to 310 potency. Meanwhile, Gigrants was buffed by 13% from 240 to 270 potency. This buff unfortunately isn't doing anything for Techters. Grant's glitter is designed around force, and for that reason its gimmick is designed around consistent damage rather than burst damage. You really only want to use light techniques to set your element to light after a revoke. Mejid was buffed by 7% from 280 to 300 potency. This was probably done to make mobbing with Mejid a bit more enticing, over simply using Talus. Unless they speed up Mejid significantly, I'll keep recommending Talus due to its consistency. Gimejid was buffed by 3% from 310 to 320 potency. This is a very minor buff, but Gimejid was already really strong, so it didn't really need anything. Well, that's all for technique buffs, let's move on to the new skills. First off, we have a new skill for Talus, Tricky Capacitor Bloom Flourish. This skill essentially changes the Tricky Capacitor skill into an AoE version, depending on which formation of spread shot you're using. This is huge for Talus in terms of mobbing. We now have access to a 700 potency AoE nuke every few seconds, since tricky capacitor charges stupidly fast in mobbing situations. Previously, it was very awkward to use against groups of enemies. Now, it's a button you want to press as much as possible. I really welcome this addition. For wands, we received wand technique skip beat. After using a charge technique, using the normal attack button gives us a new attack that closes the gap to an enemy, and acts as the third step of a normal attack, which means we can go into the fourth normal attack immediately after. This new skill fixes a big hole in our toolkit, namely the lack of vertical movement. This is a huge addition for us in order to deal with big or airborne enemies. Similarly, if we run into a situation where we don't have enough PP after a revoke and element set combo, we now can go directly into normal attack, which will restore a big chunk of our PP. Because this skill acts as a normal attack, it also has generous guard frames, and benefits greatly from wand lovers. We still don't have the exact values in order to calculate an accurate DPS number, but the early estimates show that this skill shouldn't be spammed, and instead should only be used in situations where it's appropriate. I'll update you in a pinned comment once we have the exact DPS values figured out. Overall though, this is a fantastic addition to our toolkit. I'll leave a link to Einhander's video showcasing the skill. They're much more skilled with Techter than I am. And that's about it for this update. How do you feel about it? I'm personally really happy with what we've got. My next video will probably be a complete guide on Techter, though obviously not as exhaustingly long as my written version. It will take a while though, since I have a lot of work to do, setting up a creative space where I can record it. So, don't expect it soon. I'm working with my girlfriend on a new video series that could be posted on the channel in the meantime. Won't say what it is though. Anyway, I hope you'll have a fantastic day and I'll see you in the next one. Take care!